Okay. And this is the second part of a series of LinkedIn Live events that I'm going to do, really focusing on partnering with AI as a partnership leader, a partner manager. How can you leverage AI to make your job easier, to help you get your work done, to give you some resources that you otherwise may not have had available? Most partner managers are a bit of a lone wolf, right? Whether you're a member of a team or whether you're the only partnership leader within an organization, there is a lot to do. There's a lot of balls you have to keep in the air. Whether you're managing 3 partners, 10 partners, 50 partners, really kind of depends on the role and the opportunity. But there's always a lot going on, and you're managing a lot of different workflows, a lot of different conversations, a lot of different responsibilities. And I really believe that AI is going to provide a tool set that we haven't had before as partnership leaders. The limitations and the expectations, have often been misaligned. We don't get a big budget for technology most of the time. And I always contrast that with, say the marketing group. They'll have half a dozen or more tools that they have budget for and that they're leveraging for their programs. And I think that's been a shortcoming and an oversight within partner programs and partner ecosystems. And I think AI is going to give us some tools here to level the playing field a little bit and start to live up to the expectations and meet the expectations that our companies have and that we have on ourselves to be successful in our roles. So I've been thinking a lot about the types of workflows that are important to partner leaders and partnering professionals. And I go back to when I was a partner manager, and I think about even when I was at my most successful, right? The programs were scaling, the partners were engaged, we were accelerating, we were growing our business, we were contributing to revenue, we were on target for our numbers. Even at that point, my job seemed to always devolve into managing my calendar and keeping my inbox empty as possible. And so that's how I'm kind of approaching this concept of partnering with AI. What are those things that are filling up my calendar and filling up my inbox? And how do I lighten that load? What if you could take 80% of what was filling up your inbox today and create a workflow around that based on the use case? So that's where I start with this concept of partnering with AI, which is the act of partnering, creating partnerships, engaging with partners, creating value for multiple parties. How do you do that, and how do you enhance that with AI tools? And what I've developed is a framework that I'm using in workshops with clients and prospects to help them really think about, how do I design a workflow? It may not be a skill set that we all have natively. I come from a more technical background, studied engineering in college, and I really like systems and design thinking, but not all of us approach things that way. But it's easy to learn, and given a framework, you can take that to the next level. So I wanted to share with you today the framework that I've developed. I'm calling it the PartnerFlow Automation Canvas. Again, it's focused on partnering, making that workflow easier, more effective, and more streamlined through whatever processes you can think up. And this is a framework and an exercise that is going to help you think about things in systems, in workflows, and from a design perspective. It's a little hard to see there, so I'm going to pull it up a little bit of an expanded view. And I'm going to walk through each section of this framework, but I wanted to blow it up here and give you a view of that in aggregate, starting all the way from what am I trying to accomplish? Why do I want to create a workflow around this? What do I expect to achieve, or what are the benefits that I expect from taking this manual process and shifting it to an automation? All the way through the inputs, the outputs, the overall process that we want to design and create through various tools, all the way down to thinking about security, right? The one thing we don't want to do is we're starting to pull in, some ad hoc tools and some tools that, mm, we're signing up for a subscription for $20 a month. We do want to think about some of the security implications if we're using that part of our day-to-day job, or as we're using that as part of our um, roles and responsibilities for our organization. So we definitely want to keep security in mind, and we'll talk about that a little bit as well. So let's go through each of these, kind of step by step. Starting with the problem statement and why you want to do this or create this automation in the first place. Again, I start from what is the load I'm trying to take out of my manual list of things to do and automate that. So, some of the use cases that I think are, key. One that I've implemented, and I think, everybody, should think about implementing, our calendars are full of meetings. Oftentimes we're back to back to back, whether it's, a discovery call with a prospective partner, whether it's a regular cadence call with an existing partner, whether it's a call we're facilitating on a deal. We're scrambling all the time, going from call to call to call. Number one, I mean, there's so many tools out there to actually help you take notes. So whether you've got one provided by your organization, whether you want to go out and sign up with a tool like read.ai, I like fellow.app. MeetGeek is another one that I've tried recently. I really encourage everybody to find a way. Some of the workspace tools, whether you're on Google, they will take meeting notes for you now on a Google Meet. Teams is building that in. Zoom has that available now. So you may use, just a standard, a tool as part of your conferencing services, but use that capability and take those notes. Again, that context switching is very hard when we're going back to back to back from meeting to meeting, and having someone or something taking those notes capture for us is really key. But the really critical part of that workflow is going back to those notes on a daily basis and pulling out those to-do items, those action items that were captured for you, and making sure you're doing the follow-through. That for me has been a critical tool that I've added, and a process that I've added to my workflow, and just helping me stay on top of the things that I commit to when I'm on any one of those calls. So I encourage everybody to do that. But the second one is, I have a meeting call prep. Oftentimes I'm not adequately taking the time to prepare for my meetings, and I want to come into every meeting that I'm going into fully prepared. So I have an AI agent that's creating a meeting brief that it sends to my Slack and it sends to my email inbox 10 minutes before every meeting I have on the calendar. And so I lay all of that out in this workflow. Why? I want to be more effective and engaged in the meetings that I have. Oftentimes I'm coming into meetings less prepared than I might be. So that's my problem statement. What's my expected outcome? I expect to save time in preparing for meetings, and I expect to be more effective in following up with meetings. So those are some of the problem statements and the outcomes that I might start with in that type of workflow. Next, we go through mapping the inputs. What is the data that's coming into this workflow that we're going to start to build off of? And in some of these, example use cases I've shared, the meeting prep agent workflow that I'm using, I've instructed it to go out to the attendee's LinkedIn profile and create a profile of each attendee for this meeting, and give me a paragraph on who they are, what they do, who they work for, and then look into my Slack history and look into my calendar and look into my email history and give me a summary of my latest interaction with every attendee on the call. So that's the data. I've got my email, I've got my Slack, I've got my calendar. Those are all inputs that I'm capturing as I'm laying out the design for this workflow. The sources, that's it's Gmail. So I'm on Gmail. So it's my Google systems. It's my calendar, it's my Google email, it's my Slack system. So those are the sources of that data, and I want to make sure to lay those out. What's the trigger that kicks off the workflow? It's my calendar. Every time, 10 minutes before that meeting, my AI tool is looking at my calendar and saying, okay, it's time to trigger this workflow. And so that's what I start with and lay that out. And so when you think about, the different types of workflows that, you want to design with this process, it might be an inbound partner request. Someone came to your website and filled out the form. So you've got data to start with, the form data that they've given you. The source is either an email that comes into your inbox, or maybe you're connecting directly to your CRM system, and it's a form fill that creates a lead or a contact in the system. That trigger would be the point in time where the form is filled out and it hits that system. So those are the types of things to be thinking about in terms of the data, the source, and the triggers for your workflows. Next, you want to think about, not jumping right into the process, but what's the output? What's the outcome that I want out of this? The data that I want to get out of my workflows, in the case of the meeting prep, I want a profile of all of the attendees. I want our history of conversation going back for the last 30, 60, 90 days. Where do I want that? I want it sent to my Slack, and I want it sent to my email in a brief. So I know, depending on where I'm at and where I'm jumping around between, I can go to either one of those locations to pull up that information. It might be 30 seconds before I start my call. I might look at it 10 minutes when it hits my inbox there. But either way. And so then what's the alert? Well, I get a Slack alert, when that Slack hits my inbox or my Slack channel. So that might be the alert that I go by. So you want to think about where you want that output to go. In the case of, the example of a potential partner analysis, what's the data that you want out of it? Well, I want an assessment of that partner. I want the research that my agent has done to align or assess them against my ideal partner profile. It might be the research that they went out, the deep research that it went out to the web and did. It might be from their LinkedIn profile. It might be from the web in general. I want a report. So that's the data I want out of that system. Where do I want it? I might send it to an email to myself. I might send it as a Google Doc or a SharePoint file that gets created on a drive somewhere. And then what's the alert I want out of that? Again, might be an email, might be a Slack message, might be some other type of alerting mechanism. But so think about what the ultimate output you want, where you want it to go, and how you want to be alerted that it is final. Now that we know what the input is to the process, now that we know what the output that we want to get is, we start to think about the flow. And, again, this is more of a narrative rather than, writing code or anything like that. I mean, most of the tools that we're using here and what I'm recommending are tools that, are no code. We might get to the point where we're vibe coding and creating some scripts and things like that to create agents for us. But in this case, I'm using tools that are no code type things, but I just want to lay out the flow and the step-by-step process that they go through. So, I might lay out the flow for my meeting prep tool is, 10 minutes before my meeting, my agent is going to get triggered, and it is going to then go out and research, and it's going to look at the calendar invite and determine who all of the attendees are. It is going to then go out and do research on all of those attendees. It's going to use the tools that it has available. It's going to use, LinkedIn data. It's going to use email. It's going to use calendar. It's going to use my CRM system. It's going to use all of those tools to compile that profile. It's then going to do that for each of the attendees. So that's important, making sure that loop is done and accomplished rather than just taking the first attendee on the list, for example. Then it's going to send that to me in a draft and send me an email. It's going to draft and send me a Slack message. And so that's the flow that I just want to lay out from a narrative description. Obviously, from a form submission for a new partner, that's the story you're going to tell here in the flow. Now that you've decided the flow and you know what that is, now you can start taking a look at the tools that you might use to accomplish this. I'm a big fan of some of the workflow automation tools, things like Zapier. If it's a very regimented flow, if it's a very deterministic flow, I know every step that I want the system to take. I'm going to call out an LLM for a single prompt, and it's going to create some content that I'm going to use in the rest of the flow. A Zapier is a great tool for that type of flow. It might be more of an agentic flow. So there's some really good AI agent no-code tools that I like, that I might use in these cases as well. So I'm going to then start to think about what is the proper tool for this flow that I have designed. And that's where a little background, a little bit of education and understanding, what that tool set and that toolkit might look like and what the best options are. Obviously you want this to flow into the rest of your tool set, whether it is your CRM system, your PRM system, your communication systems, email, Slack, whatever. So you want to lay out each of those tools and understand what those are. And then finally, if there are AI tools that you're using in that, what are the prompts? What are the instructions you're going to give those tools, and start to think about, what those are at a pretty high level. These don't have to be picture perfect prompts, but doing a high level prompt, and then as you start to build out the tool, think about how you can perfect. Prompt engineering obviously is a whole different skill set, and I think this is where everybody is kind of at today, is they're swivel chairing between a chat bot and the other outputs that they're using, emails and reports and that type of thing. And I think everybody is getting into the prompt engineering role. So, but as you're using those on a repeatable basis, you want to capture them outside of the LLM tool that you might be using. So again, kind of the final step, what you want to start thinking about is, what is the sensitivity of the data? If I'm pulling data out of my CRM system and putting it into a workflow in an AI agent framework or a workflow tool, I just want to be cognizant of the sensitivity of that data. Do I want to take my whole pipeline report with dollar values and expected close dates and contact information and share that out with some tools? Maybe I do, and that's fine. If I decide that I need to include that data in that workflow, that's fine. You just want to document the sensitivity and the potential sensitivity of some of the data you might be using throughout the workflow. And then as you've done your tool selection, you want to do a little bit of validation here. Are there certifications that they have? Are they SOC 2 compliant? Are they HIPAA compliant? But depending on your area of expertise, you want to have that information ready at your fingertips, because there's probably someone within your organization that wants to approve, sign off, or at least you want to run this by as you're implementing some new tools and some of these workflows. And is there someone that needs to take a look at this? So you want to come to the table with this full design, with the tool selection, with the assessment of the data sensitivity, the validation of the tools that you're going to be using, and bring that to that team. It might be a steering committee. It might be someone within the IT organization that just wants to take a look at it. There might be somebody that says, hey, we have approved tools. Maybe this would be a better one for you to use in this use case. So there's probably some internal process you want to think about leveraging in these scenarios. So that's the end-to-end design of a workflow, taking the busy work that is bogging you down today and is filling up your calendars, filling up your email. How can you break that down and alleviate that and select different things that are going to help you get that work done, take it out of your inbox, get it into a workflow, and do it more quickly and more effectively? So I think that's a powerful tool to use and go through an exercise in that process. It's going to allow you ultimately to scale your efforts. We have always, as partner managers, been expected to accomplish a great deal. And we've been expected to do that without a lot of tools, without a lot of support. Most companies don't have partner ops dedicated to your program. Most companies aren't giving you a big budget to go out and implement a bunch of these tools. But there are things you can do. There are tools you can bring to the table. There are processes that you can align on and things you can bring to the table that are going to help you scale up and ultimately be more successful and hit those targets that you're being given, whether it's revenue, whether it's growth, whether it's ecosystem engagement. There's a lot of things you can do leveraging some of these tools. So what are the next steps? If you're interested in this concept, if you want to learn more, schedule some time to connect, have a call. I'd love to share with you, what I've done. I've spent the last 2 years really growing, my own consulting organization, The Power of Partnering, and I've spent a lot of time experimenting with different tools, using a lot of different tools to help me automate things, to help me do better, be more effective in some of the roles that I have to take on beyond just partner management. But I've got a great deal of experience now using these tools and applying them to various workflows. We've also launched, or in the process of launching, a community called Partnering with AI that we're creating peer groups, and we're creating a community for folks to level up their AI skill sets in their partner management function. We've got a great start with the foundation members. Check out the second link there to join the community. I'm offering a discount code or a promo for anybody who is joining these LinkedIn Live sessions. The code is Kickoff 2025. We are in a pre-kickoff mode, in a community building mode right now, but would love to have you join us. The first month is always going to be free. The promotion is 6 months at 50% off. Hopefully that's something that would make sense for you. Come in, take a look around, or reach out, and if you have any questions on the community and anything that we covered today. So actually, we're rolling over now into a private community session to follow up on these LinkedIn Live sessions. So we'd love to have you join us there. So appreciate your time, and we'll call it a wrap.